Chapter 33. Diego looked street. Same level as me, but he was human and maybe 5'6", about 3 inches taller even though we were in the same weight class. Lanky for his height, he wore a bandana do-rap to accentuate a cheesy handlebar mustache. Although I knew better, his gestures were of a man who watched too many movies, the way he kept twisting his neck and balling his fists to make his knuckles crack. He entered with a bantam rooster strut. Street corner tough guy, this one, trying to make up for his human height challenges with attitude. Welcome to the ring. The fights in Mafioso Online are a great way to build a reputation, establish respect, earn bucks, and unlock special quests only available to fighters. Warning: this is an unsanctioned fight. Participating in unsanctioned fights can gather unwanted attention from law enforcement. If you are discovered participating in unsanctioned events, the authorities of River City might place arrest bounties on you. The ideas of the cops putting prices on my head didn't sit well, but the size of the raucous crowd left me suspicious they wouldn't bother. It was a city run by crime families, and Tansy wouldn't have helped me change my name for public consumption if she thought that was a real threat. Bubbles popped up all around my opponent, with glowing lines pointing to different parts of his body. You have discovered fight ratings. Each opponent you encounter in the ring has offensive and defensive ratings that apply only to the fights in Mafioso Online. Some ratings can't be viewed until you've reached level 20, but others will be available from the start. If an opponent is more than 5 levels higher than you, ratings could be hidden. My gaze shifted to a blinking pane on the right. Diego, level 7, defensive ratings, chin, 3, gut, 6, lungs, 7, offensive ratings, cross, 3, jab, 2, hook, 5, kicks, 6. Although I naturally focused on the lowest defensive rating as a potential weak spot, Diego was eager to get on with it. He shuffled toward me with his body angled to one side and knees bent, fists rolling in slow circles. My jiu-jitsu professor had called it blading the body. I held myself ready, attention glued to his motions while I moved backward in careful steps to control the space between us as we circled the ring. Diego growled in frustration when I wouldn't engage right off the hop. He shuffled in, then jabbed before retreating, baiting me. "Keep dreaming, motherfucker." I read his type like a children's book. He was all color, all show. Chaotic, not a thinker. My avoidance wound him up so tight the nodes in his jaw worked in frustration. Exactly how I wanted him. Little did Diego know, I was the one doing the baiting. We circled the ring twice with nary a punch landed. I'd shifted my notifications to the right-hand pane to monitor changes when I wanted to. "What's wrong, Diego? You nervous? Afraid of a halfling?" I shuffled forward, jerked my shoulders like I'd strike, then grinned when he jumped back. "You ready?" I grinned in contrast to his scowling face. "Jump, punk!" The human lunged, forgetting all about his body position, then pumped a half-assed feint so obvious I knew the real punch would be coming from the other side. Diego jabs. You dodge. You have unlocked the dodge skill. Your dodge skill is rank 1. I ducked easily, then expanded my grin. Diego throws a right cross. Miss, your dodge skill has reached rank 2. You're going to have to be faster than that, douche. In an unexpected blur of motion, Diego shot forward. Shoulder lowered, he slammed into my chest, then knocked me back and onto my butt. Diego uses charge. 15 HP. You resist stun. I rolled with the motion out of pure habit, planted my hands as I went ass over tea kettle, then shot back onto my feet. I'd just gotten lucky, and I knew it. Funny how easy it was to forget I was in a game world where combat abilities could be used to mitigate shortcomings. "Get your head in the fight!" I stepped forward as Diego pressed his advantage. With both my hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, I shoved them into his chest to use his inbound motion against him. His mouth dropped open as the wind left him, then I followed up with a spinning back kick that caught him in one quad. You have learned a new fighting skill. Spinning back kick. Whip in a circle, bend at the waist, then use your momentum to strike with the heel of your foot. Diego. 22 HP. If that wasn't proof, skills learned in the outside world would benefit me on the inside, nothing was. The human brought surprises of his own. Although I'd struck the leg flush, he raised the foot beneath and turned with the motion to catch me with a spinning back fist to the neck. If it had been my chin, I might have been laid out. The cords between my head and shoulder throbbed. Before I could recover, Diego wrapped both fists into the lapels of my shirt. I grasped his with one hand, then latched onto his sleeve near his shoulder with the other. My hips swiveled, and I dipped just in time to avoid a headbutt. I planted my foot over the drawstrings on his pants, then yanked him toward me. When I rolled onto my back and straightened the leg, he went up and over. His body flailed awkwardly from the moment his feet left the sand. I heard the air cough out of him when he plummeted onto his back. You counterattack Diego. Diego. 7 HP. You have discovered a new fighting discipline, Jiu-Jitsu. Your Jiu-Jitsu has reached rank 1. You have learned a new fighting skill, Yokotomo Nage. Grasp your opponent, roll onto your back, then extend your legs to send him up and over. I raised myself by bending at the waist, then shuffled around to straddle Diego's hips, pinning him under me. I brought my forearms down hard on his shoulders. Although his arms were a little longer than mine, the best he could do was slap at my triceps, since he couldn't very well draw back through the floor to gather the momentum to launch a decent punch. I bore down, watching my stamina bar and conserving my energy while he thrashed and drained his own. For good measure, I wiped my HUD clean. I could read whatever I learned later. I inched up to test him. He bucked and twisted, but he wasn't going anywhere, and he wasn't loose enough to knee me, so I was still in control. The crowd's howling faded into the background. "God damn it, what the fuck are you doing?" he spat. "Fucking loser, get the fuck off me!" He thrashed his legs to no avail, but I used the distraction to my advantage when I reared up, then slammed my forehead into the bridge of his nose. A sickening crack sounded upon impact. The crowd bellowed its enthusiasm like a singular giant being. I rose up. This time, I brought my arms off his shoulders and started drilling. Left, right. One to the mouth that left him spitting teeth and blood. Red numbers flashed bold. I couldn't be sure how many hit points he'd had when we'd started, and it was impossible to guess because he was human rather than halfling, but his health bar dropped to half. He muttered a bunch of incoherent words and blood spewed from his swollen lips. He bark-slurred something akin to, "You busted my teeth, motherfucker!" His protestations were accompanied by several attempts to strike back, but the way his eyes watered, I knew he wasn't seeing me well enough to land anything unless he was lucky. But if I let him continue to throw blows, even from a supine state with my weight bearing down, my luck would run out. I wasn't about to give him that chance, so I punched him in the mouth, putting my whole body into it. A sickening crunch was followed by a new announcement in the bubble I'd set to one side. "You have learned a finishing move, roundhouse punch, Diego, 21 HP. My opponent spewed more chiclets toward my face. He went wild beneath me. Diego is enraged. My leg jerked involuntarily, but I only lost a couple hit points from his pathetic scratching. He tried to roll over beneath me in his desperate rage. I knew then he'd lost coherency and had fallen into survival mode. I pushed my knuckles into the sand and raised my lower half to allow the roll. Halfway through his motion, I grabbed the closest wrist, clutched his shoulder with my other hand, then slid his limb into my armpit to lock it up. Something flashed, then disappeared, but I ignored it. The game likely recognized the skill and unlocked it. He screamed for me to get off, but I bore into the pressure on his shoulder. I glanced up at the boss on his throne above us, but he showed an impassive expression. No mercy coming from that quarter, and Diego was too much of an egotistical dumbass to tap out. Emitting strained groans, Diego tuckered himself out as he tried in vain to push himself up from the sand. His stamina bar blinked red. He leaked hit points. His legs kicked furiously from the pain I administered. I could have done that all day, but the crowd grew restless. My display wasn't showy enough to keep them entertained for long, and their enthusiasm could benefit me in the long run. I laid on the pressure, half hoping he'd tap out soon. He didn't. My own stamina dropped the longer I struggled with him, so I leaned on his shoulder until it snapped like the green wood I'd used to make the travois crossbars out in the forest. Sickly satisfying, honestly. Diego hollered and thrashed, but even that hurts with a busted shoulder. Not very smart. You separate Diego's shoulder. Diego, 11 HP. The crowd went berserk all around us. Still, the boss made no move to rescue my opponent. "You have to tap out or concede," I shouted in Diego's ear. Fuck you! I twisted his busted shoulder until things ground and popped. Diego gagged and sucked for air. Concede! He spat a bunch of curse words in some foreign language I couldn't decipher while his hit points drained away. Oh wait, pendejo. I knew that one. The rest wasn't Spanish, though. He slapped the sand, then whined out his concession. Releasing his arm and pushing off, I danced to the center of the ring, then doubled over to grasp my knees. The stale, stinking air wasn't much of a respite, but was still better than the coppery stench of my opponent's blood. This time, the interface ignored my command to squelch it. Congratulations! You have won your first fight in Mafioso Online, plus 135 experience. Victory is yours. Reward: a percentage of gambling stakes for your match. You have gained +1 respect with Tansy Bluebell. You have gained +1 respect with fight promoter Dan Steele. You have gained +1 respect with 27 strangers. Your reputation with Radioactive Fight Club has reached rank 2. You have gained +1 respect with Radioactive Fight Club owner Philip Diamond. Diego left by the far side entry, left arm supporting the right, and a wretched expression on his face like I'd stolen his candy. Perhaps I had. The announcer's voice swam into my ears over the crowd. Winner, Rencob! I swiped my forearms across my sweaty face. The empowered sensation surging through me was fucking amazing. Who knew? No wonder people played those games with such ferocious enthusiasm. Simulated endorphins warmed me. I'd never need pixie dust with feelings like that at the ready. They almost made me forget my cracked knuckles. Heat flushed my body, radiating from the crowd as if from an oven. It may not have been a showy fight, but I'd done as my jiu-jitsu professor had taught me, managed my space, controlled my opponent, conserved my energy. And now that I'd unlocked some basic fighting skills, maybe I could use the other moves I'd learned in real life. If the game unlocked them, they would lead to higher damage. Tansy threw her arms around me, bouncing with the contagious excitement of the moment, then planted a kiss on my cheek. We returned to the dwarf, and he provided an ice pack that wrapped around my fists. But the chilling sensation did little for the rest of my body. I needed to cool off. Where can I get some air? Tansy pointed. There's a changing room back there. Side door to an alley on the other side. Can't miss it. Thanks. Back in a few. Tansy nodded, leaning into the ring boards again. I'm going to hang back. I want to scout this match. They're in my class. I gave an approving nod. Oppo research. Once I'd snatched a paper cup of water from the table in the men's changing room, I headed for a large metal door with a red exit sign. The place stank of sweat soured with the aroma of aggression, and I longed for fresh air. The back door wasn't locked when I tried it, so I stepped out and into the alley to breathe in the night air. Just to play it safe, I stuck my foot in the door to prevent locking myself out. A head-sized flint rock next to the door was curved on the bottom where chips had been knocked out. When I used my free foot to shove it against the corner of the door, it fit perfectly. I drew a deep breath, but it caught in my chest when my lungs were halfway filled because I almost choked on the reek of rancid trash. So much for fresh air. It smelled like a hairy diaper. A single light burned at the far end of the alley, but the rest was cast in shadows. A darkened light fixture overhead was screwed into the wall of the warehouse across the way. I dragged my feet as I walked in a slow circle around the splash of light from the cracked door, then started a wider circuit as I rolled my shoulders. When the water cup was empty, I tossed it into the nearest bin. 3-pointer. The match Tansy watched was over by the time I returned, and I spied her near the wire cage speaking with a short man who still towered over her. She introduced him as Philip Diamond, the owner of the club. After shaking my ice-wrapped hand, he presented a white envelope stuffed with bills. With Mr. Steele's congratulations. Steele, the fight promoter whose name I'd seen in the victory message after my match. I took in Diamond's features, then recited his name in my head. Diamond. Diamond. Diamonds are forever. Philip Diamond. I counted $227 and couldn't help but wonder what Diamond's and Steele's takes had been. Money was nice, and I suspected I'd only gotten that much because no one expected a halfling noob to beat Diego so handily. But the increases in respect struck me as more important. If nothing else, I held unique insight into how that attribute made the mafia world go round in the outside world. I was a practiced professional when it came to ensuring the right tone of voice escaped my lips in dangerous company. Tansy grinned at the winnings in her envelope. I wondered if a splat cat was in her near future. I pulled the ice packs off my knuckles and dropped them in the bin the dwarf indicated before heading out. There wasn't a bruise to be found, even less a scratch. All the carriages were spoken for by the time we traipsed onto the street out front. We strolled for a bit before catching a tram back up to the edge of the halfling district to cut walking time. Whether draft horse or dragon breeds, the fantasy animals dragging the carriages faded when I drew them into my direct sight line. But when I turned my head and caught them in my peripheral vision, they were burly creatures, their forms seeming to morph every couple seconds. Even when I got an up-close, sideways look at the hulking monsters, I couldn't tell what they were, and the inspection bubble labeled them simply Dark Beast. I was about to ask Tansy what the hell they were when she broke out in excited chatter. "That was so amazing!" "Not bad for my first underground fight," I agreed, though my in-game skills had far to go to match my real-world talents. I reviewed my new fighting abilities and had to admit I was a bit awestruck when I realized how the system had spared me some details when I'd been in battle. Spinning back kick whip in a circle, bend at the waist, then use your momentum to strike with the heel of your foot. Applies to combat inside and outside of the ring. Type, unarmed attack damage, 929. Physical Yoko, Tomo Nage. Grasp your opponent, roll onto your back, then extend your legs to send him up and over. Applies to combat inside and outside of the ring. Type, throw damage, 121. Physical additional effect, 13% chance to stun. Requires, Jiu-Jitsu, roundhouse punch. Turn it loose with this wide-arcing finisher. Applies to combat inside and outside of the ring. Type, finishing move damage, 2044. Physical additional effect, 25% chance to daze if your opponent's chin rating is lower than your brawn attribute. Applies to combat inside and outside of the ring. Dodge. This is the likelihood you'll get out of the way when someone attacks. This combat skill only applies to the fights and does not apply to combat outside the ring. This skill is not affected by attributes and can only be ranked up through use in the fights. In combat outside the ring, your chance to avoid attacks is determined by your evasion action skill. Current rank, 1+, 0.5% chance to dodge attacks from opponents of equal or lesser level. Shoulder lock. Gain leverage by wrenching your opponent's arm into an arm lock. Damage, 4.7 physical per second. Additional effect, defense down. With the exception of the dodge skill, I could rank up those attacks inside and outside the ring. Good to know. But I doubted I wanted to run around in the open starting conflicts in River City, especially when every district was a crime family's turf. They'd frown on that shit if MO reflected the sentiments of the outside world accurately. As it was the genuine article in enough other ways, I was almost certain it would. Tansy led me to the cafe through the back alley courtyard, and I expected her to take us in the door where I'd delivered the hogs. But she paused at a shed covered in thick vines dotted with purple flowers, then placed her palm on a sigil engraved on the door. Something ground on the other side of the wood before it swung inward on silent iron hinges. She tapped a sconce on the wall just inside to give us some light, then several others illuminated around the room. Each harbored a glowing crystal. I scanned racks of dried herbs, fat-bottomed glassware, mortars and pestles, bowls and strange equipment for which I had no names. Jars cluttered the island counter, meticulously labeled. A stove and sink sat on the back wall. The halfling woman caught me eyeing it. She threw her arms out to her sides with the palms up. Also, I can practice recipes before inflicting them on the cafe's clients. I chuckled. It was my mother's lab. She was an amazing alchemist. She only taught me a little before... Before? Although she drew a deep breath and tried to adopt a stoic expression, Tansy's brows scrunched with old sorrow as she spoke. My mom made the cafe what it was before Bowminster came along, twisting arms all around the square, breaking up businesses, breaking faces, wreaking havoc with his nasty brutes to let us know there was a new boss in the district. Mom didn't play nicely, so he made an example of my family. Pay protection or learn quickly why you needed it. The irony of that racket isn't lost on me. Siphon money from businesses with the promise they'll never be robbed or burned to the ground, only to have the protector rob them or burn them to the ground if they refuse to pay. For a noob, you seem to know a lot about it. I wasn't sure how to answer that. I ruminated, then nodded. Call it intuition. But Tansy was no dummy. That's really specific intuition. Time for a change of subject. Did what happened to your mother come because she refused to pay? Her head swirled left to right in a quick, subtle gesture. It wasn't money. My father eventually convinced her it was best to hand over a little brown bag when the orcs came knocking. Then Bowminster stopped in and experienced the cafe, the buffs from her food. I intuited, she emphasized the word to show my change of subject hadn't gone unnoticed, that Bowminster's muscle would enjoy buffs like those. He could use them to increase his sphere of influence. But Mom refused to give over her recipes. Maybe a scrap here and there, but she wouldn't give up the big tome. I'm envisioning a thick-bound book with leather bindings. And you're about right. It contained recipes and research handed down through our family for generations. Tansy gestured around the lab at all the equipment gleaming on the work tables. They broke in here one night to steal the grimoire, but my mother was up late filling a patron's order. Her dimples flattened, her mouth fighting to form the words. Her face crumpled, and a tear snaked free, but she swiped it away with the hurried curl of one arm. Her voice continued in a growl. His damn thugs broke all her tools, shattered the beakers and jars. Dad and I guessed they tried to intimidate her. And when that didn't work, they killed my mother and left her body on the floor. They snatched the family grimoire, took everything they didn't break, but I refused to let her legacy die and replaced everything I could. I grasped her hand, hoping she wouldn't draw it away. She didn't, so I squeezed. Are you the one who found her? She nodded, and after a moment, another tear slipped free. Lost, beloved family was a fresh wound forever. I glanced at the floor where she indicated, where a small woven rug lay. The floor was swept spotless, not a drip nor crumb to reflect alchemical endeavors, just like the cafe itself when I thought of it. Tansy's shoulders shook with restrained sobs, so I stepped closer to wrap my arm loosely around her. She leaned in to cry against my chest. Over her shoulder, I took a slower gander. All the broken equipment must have cost a fortune. A line of books stood watch over the workspace nearest the door, all research titles featuring inlays depicting plants, animals, and alchemical equipment. A journal lay open to a spread covered in neat penmanship. I squinted to eye small sketches drawn in the margins, but all I got for my trouble was a pop-up bubble. You lack the alchemy skill. Learn alchemy and upgrade it to rank 15 to read these pages. I assumed they were Tansy's notes from when she tried to replicate her mother's recipes. The wavy pages where she'd been writing far outnumbered the smooth blank ones at the back. Several similar volumes were tucked neatly on a shelf. She'd been working hard, and I wondered how long she'd been at it. When she drew back, I noticed a wound on the cheek that had been turned away from me. Too tough for ice? Her lips quivered but spread into a smile. Her oversized eyes turned toward me, her gaze locked onto me, and I had to shake off the mesmerizing allure. Distraction time. Here, let's get you fixed up. I nudged her down on the stool, then got to work cleaning her split cheek with water from a nearby pitcher. She directed me to a basket next to a jar of something slimy-looking containing a jumble of first aid supplies. I get the impression you're always prepared. I pinched the wound, then applied strips of butterfly tape to seal it. Although her jaw clenched to make up for it, Tansy didn't wince. A thought occurred when I reached into the basket again. You keep your fighting supplies out here instead of your room? So Daddy doesn't get upset when seeing them reminds him I fight. He pitched a complete fit the first time I came home with a split lip and both eyes blackened. Threatened to ground me for the rest of my life, age be damned. Better to keep it out of sight. But I doubt it's out of mind since he can see the bruises, scrapes, and tape. Better that than fresh wounds. Granted. I stood straight to peer around her ears and the back of her neck to make sure I hadn't missed anything. You're good to go. You've got one of your own. Shall I tend it? My chin wasn't so happy about attention, and I shuddered when Tansy applied alcohol. She followed that with a stinking ointment from a little brown glass jar before taping it up. Diego's nails had looked none too clean, but I hadn't seen any warning messages about infection. Maybe in-game treating of wounds sped the healing. I'm sorry about all that with your mom, but remember, I'm on the job. I'm still a noob, but sooner or later Bowminster's going to get what's due. Her nod was almost indiscernible, like she expected nothing to come of my pledge. I couldn't blame her. If she'd been a child when her mother was murdered, that was a long haul without retribution. A surge of irritation rose with the thought, but I silently talked myself down. Tansy wasn't real. None of this was. But in the context of M.O., reputation and respect might earn my way to a gang, and eventually, the toppling of some 411 on some money laundering or other crimes about whose knowledge might earn my freedom. Believe me when I say Bowminster is going to be taking a permanent dirt nap before I'm finished. Thoughts about the absence of reality drifted away when a new system message popped up, and I caught Tansy's gaze lingering on my face. Plus, respect with Tansy Bluebell. 3 more respect, and I'd earn a point of loyalty from the halfling woman. I couldn't imagine a tougher, more reliable partner to act as what she'd called an enforcer, was that right? In my gang. It was time to do something about that.